שיר למעלות, אשא עיני אל ההרים, מאין יבוא עזרי. עזרי מעם אדוני, עושה שמיים וארץ. אל ייתן למוט רגליך, אל ינום שומרך. הנה לא ינום ולא ישן, שומר ישראל. אדוני שומרך, אדוני צילך, על יד ימינך. יומם השמש לא יככה, וירח בלילה. אדוני ישמורך מכל רע, ישמור את נפשך. אדוני ישמור צאתך ובואך מעתה ועד עולם.
In Pirkei Avot, the ethics of our fathers, Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai once asked his students, what is the proper path of righteousness? Eager to please their teacher, each student offered an answer. Rabbi Eliezer said, a good eye, to be content with what you have and not be envious of others. Rabbi Yoshua said, a good friend, the ability to be compassionate and caring toward others. Rabbi Yossi said, a good neighbor, to encourage goodness and harmony with those around you, making the world a better place. Rabbi Shimon said, one who foresees the consequences of their actions, to act with wisdom and foresight. Rabbi Elazar said, a lev tov, a good heart. Rabban Yochanan smiled and said, I prefer Rabbi Elazar's answer, for it includes all the others. A good heart is the foundation of all virtues. Our dear friend, Dr. Norman Talsky of blessed memory, had all the aforementioned qualities, but above all, he had a heart of gold. I've stood here for 25 years, officiating at hundreds of funerals, but never has it felt this personal. Norm was not just a congregant, he was a true friend. We first met 25 years ago when I came to Beth Shalom, a young chazan at the age of 30. Full disclosure, when I inquired about leaving my position in Montreal for Beth Shalom, I was warned about a few tough guys in the leadership to be wary of. I was also told about a wonderful guy who I should seek out. His name was Norm Talsky. From the moment we met, I understood what everyone meant. Nuchum, as he was affectionately called in Hebrew, would literally give you the shirt off his back. His devotion to Beth Shalom knew no limits. He served in every capacity: board member, senior officer, president, ritual chair, and high holiday chairperson. When he chaired the ritual committee, they eventually had to replace him because he was too nice to the clergy. Even the clergy that was ultimately terminated loved Norm, and he loved them back. He kept in touch with so many former chazanim and rabbanim wherever they landed after serving this esteemed congregation. Norm was an everyday guy who loved everyone. It didn't matter your background or your path in life. He saw the good in you. When Norm walked into a room, you wanted to shout, "Norm!" just like the Cheers sitcom, because he had that warmth and easygoing charm that made everyone feel welcome. At Albion Dental Center, Norm quietly cared for countless people who could not afford to pay. From caregivers who worked in my home to friends in need, he was there for all of them, day or night, never asking for a penny. I often asked him why he worked so hard. His answer was simple. I worked to care for my work family. I would never abandon them. When an employee left Beth Shalom during tough times, you'd often hear them answering the phones at Albion Dental Center the following week. Norm made sure people could provide for their families and live with dignity. He was exceptionally generous to Beth Shalom. Exceptionally. Whenever I asked for help, he had only one question: what do you need? If I hosted a concert, Norm would buy 20 tickets and give them away to friends. And yes, I would catch him napping during the performance, because as you all know, Norm never slept. Technology was never Norm's friend. If you ever emailed him at nudnik@simpatico.ca, named after his beloved dog, you know the response rarely came, unless someone in his office checked for him. He loved long lists, the old-fashioned way, particularly around the high holidays, when he would be found in the back office with Rivi, sorting through pages of members to determine who was due for an aliyah this year. He had a system, and trust me, it was not automated. My love of cottaging began at Norm's bachelor pad on the lake. My son Sammy was only 3 months old, and Norm made sure we had a place to recharge that summer of 2002. It became an expensive habit as we eventually bought a cottage of our own. Norm loaned out his cottage to everyone. I'm not sure he even locked it. I took Norm with me to Havana in 2008, along with some of his friends I affectionately referred to as the Rat Pack. He and his friends took Havana by storm, enjoying Havana's nightlife long after the others had all gone to sleep. For Norm, nighttime was not for sleeping. For over 20 years, Norm joined my family for Seders at my house. He loved it so much, and we loved having him. In the early years when my kids were young, we would start the Seder early, run to shul in the middle for davening, and then return to catch up with the others for dinner. He was affectionately known by my kids as Uncle Normie. He was always the kid during our rowdy singing of Haggadah at the end of the night. Our Seders will never be the same without his impersonation of the little goat. I will miss calling him before Shabbat and hearing his voicemail. You have luckily reached Norm. Please leave a message, and I will get back to you in the next year. Norm, my friend, for all of us who loved you, we take comfort in knowing that you are no longer suffering. We have truly lost one of the good ones. The book of Job says, Adonai natan, b'Adonai lakach, yehi shem Adonai mevorach. The Lord has given, and the Lord has taken. Blessed be the name of the Lord. But how do you honor someone who celebrated life's most important moments with you? How do you give a voice to someone who has left this world in the physical sense? Our tradition teaches for every action there is a reaction. Instead of asking what you can say, ask what can you do. There are no words to comfort a mourner, but what we can do is remember the blessings Norm brought to our lives and continue his legacy through our actions. In the coming days, I ask you to step out of your comfort zone and perform a mitzvah, a charitable act of loving kindness to honor his memory. Whenever you do a random good deed, think of Norm and live by the example he set. Tehei nishmatot tzura b'tzor chaim. May his soul be bound up in the bond of life eternal. Rest in peace, my dear friend. I would now like to share some beautiful words sent to me from Cantor Yisrael Gutman, who lives in Boca Raton, Florida. Yisrael was my predecessor and served as Beth Shalom's chazan from 1992 till 2000. To my dearest friend and mentor, Nachum ben Aryeh Leib, it pains me deeply that I cannot be at your funeral today. Since the first day I arrived in Toronto in 1992 to fill the position as chazan at Beth Shalom, you opened your home and your heart to me, my wife, and our children. You were the most gracious host, doing everything you could to make us feel welcome, comfortable, and cared for. That kindness left an everlasting impression on me, and it was only the beginning of the friendship and mentorship you so generously gave. Even in your final days from your hospital bed, when words were difficult, you still found the strength to share as much as you could with me. I witnessed how much pain and suffering you endured, and I thought of the teaching from our holy books. Yesurav shel Adam mechaprim al avonotav, that the suffering of a person serves as atonement. You bore it with courage and faith, and I have no doubt that it has elevated your soul. Many people may not fully know the depth of your commitment to tzedakah, to true charity and kindness, but I saw it, I lived it, and I know it was central to who you were. It was something you absorbed and learned from the Talsky home you grew up in, and it became the foundation of your life. The countless acts of generosity, the quiet help you gave to others, the mitzvot you fulfilled day after day, all of these created angels who now accompany you before the Kisei HaKavod, the throne of glory. I am certain that the many good deeds you performed will serve you well in Gan Eden. You leave behind a legacy of kindness, wisdom, friendship, and love that will continue to inspire all who knew you. To Marvin, Sai, and the entire Talsky family, I send my heartfelt sympathy and condolences. May his neshama find eternal peace, and may the memory of Norman Talsky forever be a blessing. You will be sorely missed, my dear friend. With love and respect, Yisrael, Chaya, and the entire Gutman family. Thank you.
Norm was born December 21st, 1938. One of four brothers, remembered lovingly today by his brothers Marvin and Simon, sister-in-law Helene, as well as we remember his brother Joseph, Zichrono Livracha. He's remembered lovingly as well by his nieces and nephews, Lori and Alan, Marla and Cliff, Cheryl and Ray, Jordan and Natalie, Mark and Aaron, Susan and Al, Jordana, Zachary, Stephen, Glenn, and Rick, along with so many great nieces and great nephews, and so many other friends and people whose lives he touched. As we continue our service, we'll share more words and more stories, and share words from our tradition, readings and psalms, as we remember a life well lived. I invite you to join me in repeating the following words. Baruch, Dayan, Ha'emet. It means praise is the judge of truth. I'm going to share some words now from Rabbi Flansreich. who I know is very sorry that he couldn't be here today, as he and Norm had a long and close relationship. He writes, "With great pain, I am not with you today. I'm in Calgary officiating at my mother-in-law's unveiling. Despite this absence, I wanted my words to be heard, and I'm grateful to Cantor Moses and Rabbi Sachs for sparing the time and reading this for me. If it is true to say it is a blessing to live in one's place for a long time, which it is doubly true to say it is a blessing to serve as a rabbi in one congregation for a long time. It has become a profound joy to share life with each of you. But as I sat to write, it occurred to me there's something they don't teach young rabbis to be, who rightly believe in the goodness of leading a congregation for a long time. They don't tell you of days like today. Bearing a friend is a task no one wishes for. This morning I speak as friend and rabbi. From my first day at Beth Shalom, Norm, also known as Normie, but I never did call him Norm or Normie very much. I always liked to call him Nuchem. And from that first day, Nuchem was always here. The business of the shul business in his soul. Looking after, busying with, worrying about the next holiday. Distributing aliyot for Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, hanging the fruit and gourds for the sukkah, handing out apples and Israeli flags to the children on Simchat Torah, boiling and serving hot dogs at Hanukkah and Purim carnivals. Beth Shalom was both home and family. And make no mistake, when I say family, I mean family. Let's now remember the itinerant visiting cantor who borrowed a car from him. Neither the car nor the cantor was ever seen again. But this funny memory isn't a punchline, it's his storyline. In Jewish tradition, we are commanded, ve'ahavta l'recha kamocha, to love the other as you would love yourself. Emphasis, as you would love yourself. On reflection, I can vouch this is one mitzvah Nuchem never observed. That is because he cared for and loved others far more than he ever cared for himself. He seldom gave any concern to the clothes on his back. But if he heard someone needed a new suit, shoes, shirt, he looked after it. He never cared for the money he earned, but he employed many people for the sake of giving them a job. Lent money to people and never asked for it back, supported others in need, and always did so quietly. Some names over the years I've come to know, but no doubt they are dwarfed by the names I will never know. To be sure, there is no talking of Nuchem without admiring and admitting who he was. When healthy, Nuchem came to my house for Shabbat, for Pesach, for Rosh Hashanah and Sukkot. He would smile and tell me he'd leave early as a signal to everyone else to leave, so we could get to bed early. Which always struck me as odd because this was a man who never had a decent night's sleep. As a young boy, his father worked in the produce business, and along with his brothers, Nuchem had to wake up at 3:30 to get to the terminal for the day's business. And when that was done, he went to school. He liked to say that's why he could never sleep through the night. But we all know it was his excuse to avoid talking to a doctor about it. He loved going to Tim Hortons at 3 a.m. He loved the stock market. But what he loved wasn't the Fortune 500 companies, the index leaders of the S&P or the NASDAQ. Nope. Normie loved the penny stocks. And be it up or be it down, he never changed. He never got upset, never lamented what once was made was now lost. He loved the game of it all. And maybe he understood that no matter what we make, it's all lost in time. I know there are others who wish to speak, but allow me to quickly get to what I really need to say. Years back, when Lisa and I were building our house, Nuchem came to us and said he wanted to buy the oven for our kitchen. We, of course, demurred. But he was a man who never took no seriously, stubborn and yes, hard-headed, but so soft-hearted. And to this day, the oven in our house is not ours, but Nuchem's. It's hard to imagine that a man who seldom slept is now in his eternal sleep. I'm not sure I'll ever come to its complete acceptance. But as he enters into his next world, I know, like the oven in my home, his is a memory that will now keep us warm. I know this because I feel it now, and yet I will miss him so. Yehi zichrono baruch leolam haba. May his memory be for a blessing in this world and in the one to come. Our tradition teaches us, Tamid Hachami met mi mevi lanu temorato. There's no replacing a person of wisdom. There are mines for silver, places where gold is refined, iron comes from the earth, copper from rock. But there are some people, our tradition tells us, who are simply irreplaceable. Norm is one of those. I want to invite now his nieces and nephew to share some words, Susan, Jordana, and Zachary, about their dear uncle.
Hi, everyone. I'm Susan. Norm Talsky was many things. He was a son, he was a brother, he was a friend, and as a dentist, he was an employer to many people, including myself, because I worked a summer at Albion Dental Center. In fact, I'm just curious. At some point, how many of you have worked at Albion Dental Center? Raise your hands. Yeah. Yeah. But to me, he was Uncle Norm. I have a few stories that I'd like to share with you of my Uncle Norm. When I was younger, maybe 10 or so, I remember Uncle Norm taking me to the theater, Young People's Theater downtown on Front Street, for an evening out. It was just the two of us, and we went to see the play Annie. He picked me up, and I got all dressed up. I think he picked me up in a Jeep, which was really cool. I got all dressed up, and then after the play, he took me for veal sandwiches. So again, how many of you have gone for veal sandwiches with Uncle Norm? Yeah, right? San Francesco's, all right. It made me feel really special, just me and Uncle Norm out on the town. Uncle Norm had a bit of a goofy side, and I'm not sure that everyone got to see that, but I remember when my daughters, Ellie and Sarah, were about 5 or so, we were in Toronto. We live in California, and we were in at a family dinner at my father's house. The girls went upstairs to Jordana's old bedroom and found little packets of jam and maple syrup in her old bedroom. You know the kind you get from IHOP, right? Like the little ones you're always tempted to steal. So apparently you had a thing for, maple syrup and jam. So at some point, Uncle Norm went upstairs, and my daughters to this day say that he volunteered to let them smear jam and maple syrup all over his head. It was the funniest thing ever. They were laughing so hard. And I remember my husband, Al, and I coming up and seeing Uncle Norm lying on Jordana's bed, covered in jelly, and asking if he needed any help. And he just laughed and said, "Nope, I'm just fine, pal." So we went back downstairs. Just a few weeks ago, I was here in Toronto, and I went to visit Uncle Norm with Al, my daughter Ellie, and her boyfriend Elliot. And while we were there, Uncle Norm asked me if I could get him some milk from the little mini fridge that was in his room. When I opened the fridge, I saw that there was a spray can of whipped cream. So I asked him if he trusted me, and he said, "Of course I trust you." And I said, "Close your eyes and open your mouth." I proceeded to spray whipped cream directly into his mouth, which he loved and laughed. So I said, "Let's keep going." And I did it a few more times. That was my last time that I saw my Uncle Norm. And that's how I'm going to choose to remember him. Laughing with a mouthful of whipped cream, watching the Toronto Blue Jays.
My early recollections of Uncle Norm are of someone jovial and fun-loving, a person who liked to have a good time and do things his way. There are so many stories that I can't tell that all of you have, and it's been really heartwarming to read beautiful messages, receive notes, and speak with others of the many good times that he helped to make and celebrate and how special he was. For me, Uncle Norm and Albion were closely tied from a young age, along with my parents. Albion was more than a workplace, it was a world unto itself. And as a young adult, I too did my time working at Albion. It had always been a part of my world. For Uncle Norm, it was much more than a business, it was a purpose. He cared about and gave the many people who worked there important opportunities to have a career, grow their careers, take on new roles, or to find stability that allowed them to flourish in their personal lives. He took his role as an employer very seriously, knowing that his decisions directly affected people's lives. As we know, he kept that ship running as long as he possibly could, feeling the weight of that responsibility. Over the years, I've met musicians in my circles who had him as their dentist, and when they learned that he was my uncle, their faces would light up and they would tell a funny story, and it was clear that he left a lasting, positive mark. Beth Shalom is another place forever connected in my mind with Uncle Norm and with my Zadie. His dedication to the community was clear in the countless hours he spent at the shul. I remember being here as a kid for events. I remember the Purim carnivals where he would dress up in something zany and funny and would always be there making sure everyone had a good time. Through his dedication to the shul, he not only honored his father and our traditions, but also expressed a beautiful connection and found another meaningful way to serve others. Uncle Norm's generosity and charitableness were quite extraordinary. He opened his home, his cottage, his offerings to so many over the years. When people were at their low points, he carried them through difficult times, and he would selflessly put others' needs first consistently. He truly seemed to have a calling to help and serve others. He was family to many friends and a friend to many families. I feel fortunate to have shared more personal times with him as we both grew up in our later years. Zach and I had some great dinners at home or at restaurants with him, and I'm very grateful for those times. Also, he made the best charoset. I could eat a tub of it, and I have. I appreciated his finely chopped salads at the Seders, really great. Even as his health declined, even on really tough days, he would always ask after me, how am I doing? How's work going? How's my dad doing? His concern for others never faded. That, to me, is his lasting legacy, a man who built, who gave, and who carried so many through life's challenges with remarkable strength and generosity.
Before I begin, we would be remiss if we did not acknowledge all the wonderful people who helped Norm in his final years. The people at Amica, Sunnyside Rehab Center, Humber River Hospital, Cousin Glennie, the Stars, and Saul and Janice, without whom we probably would have been here months ago. We are eternally grateful. The night Normie passed, after everyone had left for the evening, my sister Jordana, cousin Jordan, and I remained at the hospital with Normie, watching over him and reminiscing about the good old days. And Jordan began telling us memories of a younger Norm, a slender Norm, an athletic Norm. We looked at him in disbelief. The only Norm I ever knew was giant teddy bear Norm, almost too large for me to wrap my arms around when hugging. I did not know any other Norm. He had already lived a full life before I had come along, already 45 when I was born, 4 years older than I am now. So I will tell you about the only Norm I knew of, Uncle Normie. To me, Uncle Norm was a kindred spirit, a lone wolf, multi-layered and sometimes misunderstood. He was like an onion. Each layer peeled, revealing different flavors the further inwards you went. On the surface layer, there was sweet Norm, fun Norm, silly Norm, and my personal favorite, sarcastic Norm. He had this way of saying something entirely forthright and direct, but dripping in sass, and always accompanied by a look, a little twinkle in his eye, and a sideways smile. One eye almost closing to wink at you, but not quite, a signal that you were in on the joke. It was my favorite gesture. I learned it well. Over the past couple of years, I developed a habit of calling him at times when I knew he wouldn't be able to answer the phone. Not because I didn't want to speak to him, that was an added bonus, but because I wanted to hear his voicemail. It was magical. It went like this. You have very luckily phoned Norm, and I'll do my best to get back to you sometime in the next year. Thank you. It never ceased to make me laugh. The perfect reflection of Norm's abrupt and direct nature, and yet utterly hysterical. It was Norm to a T. The next layer was, well, challenging Norm. He was opinionated. He was vocal. He was headstrong, as most leaders tend to be. But we forgave him these trespasses because that's what we do with the people we love, and the pros so vastly outnumbered the cons. Now we get to the inner cores of the onion. Charitable Norm. Immensely charitable Norm. Charitable to a fault Norm. Whether it was with his time or money, there was no bounds to what he would give, many times even to his own detriment. A patient that needed to see him, no problem. Financial difficulties, no problem. Need a car, no problem. Legal issues, what can I do? Need a day off, take 2. Want the cottage? Here are the keys. There are no keys. Need a flight? Use my points. Better yet, take my card. Birthday presents, wedding presents, no reason presents. What's that? There's a Shiva in need of someone to lead services? What's the address? Need a minion? You got it. The shul needs something? Heaven and earth would be moved. Continuing to operate his cherished dental practice for many years beyond what his physical limitations could clearly handle, out of a compulsion of both responsibility and love to his employees and patients. Having his 25-year-old nephew paint that same dental practice a truly unwise color selection for a medical office, only because he knew that nephew needed the work. These are only but a handful of examples I could list to illustrate a fact we here all know too well. And last, but certainly not least, Party Norm. Uncle Norm loved to party. Office parties, cottage parties, Passover dinners for 50 people, giddy up. The Shul Brotherhood is having their annual dinner party. Norm will buy a table, thank you very much. Birthday parties, dinner parties, costume parties, cocktail parties, Christmas parties, Hanukkah parties, Vegas parties, and most importantly for me, Super Bowl parties. For it is the one and only Norman Talsky that is responsible for turning me into the proud, sad sack Buffalo Bills fan that I am standing before you today. It was January 1993. I was 8. The Jays had just won the World Series and the Leafs were 4 months away from Borshevsky in overtime. I knew nothing of football, but surprise, surprise, Norm was having a party, so off we went. I remember it like it was yesterday. I was sitting on the carpet of the living room on Bob White, box TV in front, and there behind were Norm and Ray, explaining who it was we were to be rooting for. Now, I can't remember exactly if it was because Buffalo had already lost 2 Super Bowls in a row and we were cheering for the underdog, or perhaps Norm and Ray had wagered a couple soda pops on the outcome because it was 1993 and gambling was strictly prohibited. But there it was, Buffalo. And Ray, my friend, do you remember what happened that game? That's right, they got crushed, 52-17. I was hooked. The next year was deja vu all over again. Bills, Cowboys, Uncle Norm's. This time the Bills led at halftime. They were bound to pull it off. And then Thurman Thomas fumbled the ball in the third quarter. The Cowboys scored, and here we are, 33 years later. They haven't been back since. Bills Mafia, Legion of Pain. Thank you, Uncle Norm. The last 18 months were tough, both on Norm and the people who loved him, and we grew close. Norm's declining health and growing dependence for assistance meant Normie was losing control of his self, which wore on him considerably mentally, and his internal anguish wore on all of us. It was very painful to watch such a titan of a man, both in body and personality, begin to fade away. But even in these most difficult times, he was still his whimsical self. In late November of last year, I was chatting with Janice on what had become one of our almost daily update phone calls. And she told me that Norm had said to her that he really would like a slice of pizza again. So I did what I thought any nephew should. I waited a few weeks and then prepared to bring him some on his birthday. Or at least the day I thought was his birthday. No one really knew what was going on. It was a Sunday. At the time, Norm was in Sunnyside Rehab Center, which was located in an area not exactly renowned for their pizza. But I found whichever parlor was open at 12:30, bought a pie, went next door to the convenience store, bought an ice-cold Heineken, and snuck it into his rehab. There was a COVID outbreak on his floor, so they weren't exactly readily handing out cutlery, but I did find these 2 cheap plastic cups. And there we sat, eating pizza and drinking beer, with the 1 p.m. football games about to start. And after I helped Norm with his teeth and he had taken a few bites, he turned and looked at me and said, "Zach, this pizza, it's not so good. Next time, maybe do a little better." And there it was, the twinkle in his eye and the sideways smile. Normie being Normie. As if the considerable day-to-day suffering he was enduring was not even there. And now he's gone, and all that remains are tears shed, as onions are known to yield. I only wish all this talk of onions was but for a recipe he made for someone once upon a time, and not a means to summarize a man's entire life. It would not be so hard to bear. But it is these things we will remember: his unbelievable warmth, his sense of humor, his silliness, his stubbornness and hard-headedness, but also his unparalleled generosity and zest for bringing happiness to others in any way, shape, or form. A gittin neshama, a mensch, the twinkle in his eye and his sideways smiles. Norm was a simple man. He liked simple things: Coca-Colas and a good soup, a caramel bar and a glass of milk, a beer at the cottage. Nothing flashy. He did not wish for a shiva, a request his family respectfully declined to honor. Perhaps he did not want to be a further burden on those around him after the final years of so much dependence, a metaphorical nudnik, if you will. Perhaps he was concerned that there wouldn't be enough people to attend or able to participate and form a minyan, a mitzvah he worked so tirelessly to fulfill. And yet, as I look at all of you now, I only see a room full of faces who would relish nothing more than to gather round and retell tales of when Normie did this or when Nochem did that, and honor him as he honored so many countless others, to give back to he who gave so much. It is a harsh aspect of the human condition that in death we do not get to bear witness to all those who gather to celebrate our life, perhaps the harshest aspect of all. In this instance, it seems particularly cruel for a man who so richly deserved to know how many people loved him. And so, for one last time, hi, Normie. It's all of us. We love you. I hope you get this message sometime over the next year or so.
The rabbis teach that the day of one's death is greater than the day of birth. When one of the rabbis in the Talmud states this, the others are surprised. How could that be? And the rabbi responds, it's like celebrating a ship when it leaves for its journey. It has potential, sure, but you don't know if it will accomplish its mission or if it will be blown off course. You don't know if it will come home, if it will return. But when that ship enters the harbor after a journey, then there's something to celebrate. The accomplishments, the challenges, everything it faced out at sea, all the storms it weathered and overcame, all of the things it did and accomplished. I stand here today with perhaps a unique perspective. I never had the privilege or honor of knowing Norm personally. I'm new here to the Beth Shalom community, almost at the end of my first year. And I regret that in my time here, I didn't get to know him personally. Our paths did not cross. And yet I feel I've come to know him through the stories shared with me from Rabbi Flansreich and Cantor Moses, the stories of so many in our community whom he touched, and also simply from getting to know this community, a community he was dedicated to, that he gave his time, his love, and so much more. Norm was a servant of this community. And I say that with the greatest respect, a term we don't often use today, servant. But at the end of the Torah, when Moshe Rabbeinu and our leader, who led our ancestors out of Egypt and across the wilderness to the edge, ready to enter into the promised land, when Moses passed away, the Torah gives him a simple verse, not a long eulogy. It simply says, "There, Moses, the servant of the Lord, died." This brief yet profound statement tells us everything we need to know about the measure of Moses' life. His life was one defined by service. This truth resonates with Norm. His leadership and service to the synagogue wasn't for personal glory or recognition. It was a profound act of service to a sacred place that he cared about and to the people who were there. I see his legacy in the warmth of this community, in the vibrant life that fills its services and its programs, a life he worked tirelessly to help build and sustain. This very moment, as we remember and mourn, there are 25 kids upstairs playing at our summer camp. They're there because of Norm and his service and dedication to ensuring this community continued in its mission of providing Jewish education and building a Jewish future. The same with every wedding and ufruf we celebrate here in these halls, every bar and bat mitzvah service or baby naming and bris. This community exists because of his service and others like him who have dedicated their lives to something greater than themselves. So as we feel the loss and the pain and the deep hole that is created with Norm's passing, may we also feel some of the simcha and joy of all those celebrations that exist because Norm is a part of this world and this community. A person's true measure isn't what they accumulate in life, but the impact they have on the world. Legacy isn't captured simply in plaques on a wall, but into the very fabric of community. Norm was a man who gave himself completely, and in doing so, he helped to build a living monument of kindness and dedication and purpose. And I feel a profound privilege and responsibility to be a part of carrying on that legacy. He was a servant of our community. Norm lived his life as a servant of our traditions, as a servant of God, and most of all, as a servant of humanity. May his memory be a blessing to all, and may his life of service continue to inspire us, so that someday when our journeys end, when our ships return to harbor, when our souls come back home, may it be said of us that like Norm, we too were servants of something greater than ourselves. I invite you now to rise, please, as we recite the memorial prayer.
El male rachamim shochen b'amramim hametzei menucha nechona תחת כנפי השכינה במעלות קדושים וטהורים כזוהר הרקיע מאירים ומזהירים לנשמת נחום בן אריה לייב וגולדי שהלך לעולמו בגן עדן תהא מנוחתו. אנא בעל הרחמים, הסתירהו בשאת כנפיך לעולמים, וצרול בצרור החיים את נשמתו. אדוני הוא נחלתו. וינוח בשלום על משכבו, ונאמר
Exalted, compassionate God, grant infinite rest in your sheltering presence among the holy and the pure to Norm's soul, as he has gone on to his eternal home. Merciful One, we ask that our loved one find perfect peace in your eternal embrace. May his soul be bound up in the bond of life. May he rest in peace, as we say, Amen. I ask Almighty God of the living and the dead, send comfort to your children who grieve, those who are overcome by the pain of loss. Help them to focus on the triumph and joy in Norm's life. Help them to meet their grief with courage. Help them to treasure what is now theirs because Norm has lived. May the memory of his devotion to his family and friends, his kindness and compassion, his goodness and gentleness, his warmth and friendship, dedication and integrity, and his loyalty to the traditions of our people continue to inspire us. Should despair threaten or faith falter, sustain us all, Adonai, for you are our refuge and our strength, our ever-present help in troubled times, as again we say, Amen. I ask you now to please remain standing as you listen to the following announcements and directions.